There was a painting of my grandfather's that he did in the early 80s. 5 figures, very, very colorful. And it was hanging in my grandfather's apartment in Madrid. It was and it had a lot of presence in the room. I remember at the time I was playing with a quartet, and I used that painting, the image of that painting, for the cover of the record, as the 5th figure was a very small black figure, 4 very strong, colorful figures, and the very central figure was black, and so the black figure sort of represented the music itself, and the other 4 figures of the painting represented the quartet itself. So that piece was particularly strong for me, and had a strong presence in my life. We would have, when I was a little kid, he would have many people come over. There was always people in the apartment, from teachers at Brooklyn College to other artists, to people from Europe, other artists from Europe who'd come over. And I remember specifically, I think some other refugees who were living they were from Santo Domingo, from from the Dominican Republic, and they were visiting Granell. They were visiting Granell in New York, and I remember that the conversations were always very light and friendly, and there was always a lot of food and drink, and I believe that they had kids. These particular friends, who were as well refugees as I mentioned, they had kids, and the kids were always very included with the conversations, and were always very sort of an important part with the dinner. That the conversations that were to happen with the adults, the kids were always in part of something very important. So their presence made the conversations very alive. So the connections that he was making with these specific people that day was they were recounting their past together, talking about how things were in the past. But I believe that these refugees were teachers in Santo Domingo. I don't remember their names, but that they were very much into art. They had the connection of painting together, but that they were teaching in Santo Domingo, Spanish. I think they were, I'm not sure what they taught, but they were teachers in the university in Santo Domingo. And it was like this very often. There was always people in the apartment. I remember a time when we were in New York City. I was maybe 13 or 14, 15 years old. And Philip West was over the house in the apartment in New York City. And their connections of art go way back. They always seem to have an air of a very light and a very unintellectual way of discussing art. It was very much, when they would talk about it, it was very much in the way of a loving thing that was not so pedantic. The discussion of art was always about appreciation for each other's art, for other artists that they knew, for other artists that they didn't know, and the importance that art has in the world. But there was never. There seemed like a conversation. The conversations that would take place were never in these hugely intellectual or pedantic ways of discussing things. And Philip West always loved my grandfather's work. A lot of food was eaten, a lot of wine was poured, and They had a lovely relationship with each other. Yeah. So when the Fundación opened over maybe 13 years ago now, over 13 years, the specific amount of years I'm not sure, around 13 years, when the building was first procured, it was a good feeling because the building it's a very beautiful old established building. Since the building was established as the place to house the artwork, the place has done so much work in bringing in a sense of real museum, a real feel for a proper museum. The changes with the rotating collections of other artists, and then the establishment of the permanent collection has just been really done in a beautiful way. The maintenance of the building has been very fantastic, has been wonderful. The putting in the elevator has been a very good thing. The library has been established in a very beautiful way. It's a difficult thing to maintain a fundación in today's day and age, and the way to try to get money, to raise money, has always been an issue. It's still an issue. They've managed to keep this wonderful place alive for so long, but always trying to find new ways to try to find the funds to maintain the foundation is always sort of the main preoccupation of all the employees here. And so to maintain the integrity of the museum, a continuing of that search has to happen at the highest level. They've really done a beautiful job. All the artists who come here to show their work are fantastic, and the specific maintaining of the definition of surrealism, and that artists are very dedicated to that specific type of artwork, is also something that is important to what this place is about. La Fundación Granell is about maintaining the definition of surrealism and what that is. And they're doing a fantastic job. It's really a wonderful, wonderful place here in Santiago and Galicia and Spain as a whole. So there was a bird cage that took a lot of. It hung from the roof of the main entrance, and it had a mechanical key that you could wind, and the bird would chirp. The bird would chirp inside the cage, and whenever we would come back to the apartment from New York, we'd come into the entrance of the apartment, and there would be this bird cage to sort of greet you. And I loved running to the bird cage and reaching up to the bird cage and turning the key. This was one of my grandmother's favorite pieces as well. And I'm not sure who the artist was. I think they picked it up in El Rastro in Madrid in the early 80s. So it was just a nice piece. The mechanical bird chirping in the cage was really, really quite something for me. Yeah. I remember a time I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. My sister was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and we were sitting around the dining room table. And he began telling us a story about Lady Di and how she was 8 stories high. She was bigger than buildings. And she was drinking a lot of Coca-Cola, and she had a pet giraffe. And the way that he was telling the story was that it was like a very matter-of-fact article from some newspaper. The importance of telling us this very far-out story, this very surreal story, if you will, was an important thing. The idea of being able to tell stories, the ability to have an imagination at the drop of a hat and tell a story with the most fantastic and ridiculous notions, I think was a very important thing to him to communicate this to us, that maintaining a sense of imagination and creativity in the spoken word, in the visual, in the oral, in music, is just a very, very important thing for the mind, to maintain the mind, imagination and creativity. So the way he conveyed this story was it impressed me. because it was a very intense story, but not in this very the little girl and the doll, and it was a very serious way of telling us this story of Lady Di, who was 6, 7, 8 stories tall, and we were very gripped by the story. It was a very gripping way that he told us this crazy story.